This second part of our lecture on the divided kingdom will concentrate on the prophets Elijah and Elisha. Elisha's period of prophecy mainly is concentrated during the reign of Ahab, and Elijah and Ahab are sort of, coming up against one another. And the problem was that Ahab had married the daughter of the king of Tyre, one of the Phoenician cities on the coast. And Ahab had allowed Jezebel, his wife, to build a temple to Baal in Samaria that included an image of Asherah, who was one of the Canaanite goddesses. This would have been Baal Melkart, and Baal Melkart was the official deity of Tyre. Now Ahab himself does not want to reject Yahweh. It is interesting to note that the names of his children have Yah in them. Ataliyah, Ahaziah, Yahoram. And even in his later reign, he consulted the prophets of Yahweh. But he was over tolerant of his wife, according to the biblical text. And Jezebel, sort of curiously, was kind of a fanatic about pushing the worship of Baal. This actually is not terribly typical of ancient cities and territories that worship other gods. They tend not to be trying to push the deity onto people because the deities tend to be somewhat localized. They tend to be connected with particular cities, territories. There are a number of Elijah stories that we could look at. One of the most famous is the contest between the priests of Baal and Elijah in order to see who will be able to call down fire on an altar that Elijah builds. This story portrays Yahweh's authority over fertility of the land and wants to make the point that the people's lives are in Yahweh's hand alone. Baal was sort of a weather and fertility deity worshipped by the Canaanites. But it is supposed to be the fact that it is Yahweh who controls fertility, not one of these other gods. And therefore the people must make a choice for the true God. In fact, Elijah's name means Yah is my God. The object is to determine who was Lord, who could control rain and fertility. And at the end of this contest, the drought that has been in fact, is ended as the contest is ended when it is Yahweh who brings down fire on the altar. But even though Elijah prevails, he has an immediate reaction, and that immediate reaction is doubt. And he flees to Mount Horeb, which is the name in Deuteronomy of Mount Sinai. And Elijah's problem is, how can Yahweh be in control when Jezebel is still in power? And you recall that Yahweh does not speak in the whirlwind, he does not speak in the earthquake, but he comes and he speaks to Elijah in a voice of silence. This is a contrast to what went on when Moses was on Mount Sinai, which is definitely what we call a theophany, an appearance of God with a lot of outward signs. But here, God's appearance to Elijah is very quiet. Like Moses, Elijah is very much involved in the political sphere. Moses contesting with the Pharaoh to bring the people out of Egypt, and Elijah contesting with Ahab to get Ahab and the Israelites to turn back to the one true God. There is in all of this an emphasis on the Sinai tradition, trying to reestablish contact with the God of the Exodus. Another important story is the story of Naboth's vineyard. In this, Ahab really wants a vineyard close to his palace that is owned by Naboth. And then what happens is there is a kind of conflict between what we might call eminent domain of the king and the older division of the land according to tribe and clan and family. Ahab is well aware that Israel is established with the division of land being by tribe, clan, and family, and therefore individuals have no power to sell land outright. It doesn't really belong to them as individuals. But Jezebel comes from a different system, and in that system, the king owns everything. And she can't understand why Ahab just doesn't, get rid of Naboth and take the land. But Ahab still has sort of traces of a conscience. He cannot simply do that because of that older tribal tradition. The only way he can get around that is to have Naboth charged with blasphemy and treason. And so he makes the accusation, "You have cursed God and the king." And this would warrant seizure of property by a king. So what Ahab is doing, and you see this critiqued in Isaiah and Jeremiah as something fairly common going on, is the use of the letter of the law in order to subvert justice. But Elijah calls the king to account. Ahab said to Elijah, "Have you found me, O my enemy?" And Elijah answered, "I have found you because you have sold yourself to do what is evil in the sight of the Lord. I will bring disaster on you. I will consume you and will cut off from Ahab every male bond or free in Israel." It is this particular event which seals Ahab and Jezebel's fate and brings about their downfall. One of the very unusual things about Elijah is that at the end of his life on earth, he is taken up in a chariot of fire. And the suggestion here is that Elijah did not die but is with God. As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Because of this particular narrative, there developed expectations that Elijah would later return, and this was true of both Judaism and Christianity. Elijah would come back someday as a forerunner to the Messiah. In the Gospels, there are identifications with John the Baptist as the returned Elijah, heralding Jesus Christ. In Judaism, there is a place setting left empty for Elijah during the Passover meal, and they still look forward to his return. The stories of Elisha are more, there are a lot more wonder tales, a lot more miracles, not as much political involvement. Elijah is concerned for the people, and his stories reflect conditions of continuing wars between Syria and Israel. However, Elisha is involved in two sort of political upheavals. One is that he predicts in Damascus that Hazael would be the next king. And Hazael sort of takes advantage of this and assassinates the current king, Ben-Hadad. Elisha also summons one of the sons of the prophets to anoint Jehu as king. So he is the one who brings about the downfall of the Omride dynasty.